Ladies and gentlemen, economic warfare has been declared, and President Trump just went nuclear on China. As we speak, unprecedented 104% tariffs are dropping on Chinese imports, the biggest trade counterpunch in American history. Beijing thought they could call Trump's bluff. Well, they miscalculated, and badly. The press secretary didn't mince words. She said, when America is punched, President Trump punches back harder. That's right. No delays, no extensions, and no mercy. In Wall Street, well, it's surging. The Treasury Secretary has confirmed over 70 countries are scrambling to negotiate deals with the United States. Even Nancy Pelosi's own words from 1996 are coming back to haunt her, as she once begged for exactly the tariffs Trump is now delivering. This is economic shock and awe, folks, and I am here for it. Now, while President Trump is rebuilding America's manufacturing strength through tariffs, isn't it time to rebuild your body, too? Just like our economy needs protection from foreign exploitation, your skin needs defense against aging. A groundbreaking 2024 study showed that collagen dramatically improves skin health, reducing wrinkles and increasing firmness. But not all collagen is created equal, just like not all trade deals help America. Now, this multi-collagen formula features 5 essential types from 4 premium sources, absorbing faster for maximum results. While China scrambles under Trump's 104% tariffs, you can fight back against aging at healthwithgary.com. Get 51% off today, and that's a better deal than even China is getting. Now let's rock and roll. Here we have U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer's opening statement on President Trump's tariff policy. Let's listen.
Has been unfair, unbalanced. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, I appreciate you taking the time today for this hearing. Last Wednesday, President Trump declared a national emergency in response to the large and persistent trade deficit that has built up in recent years. This deficit is driven in part by non-reciprocal tariffs, trading barriers, and other economic policies pursued by our foreign trading partners. The situation is urgent. President Trump imposed tariffs to address this emergency, and these measures are aimed squarely at achieving reciprocity and reducing our massive trade deficit to reshore production in the United States. This national emergency declaration and tariff action is the most significant change in U.S. trade policy since we allowed China to join the World Trade Organization. The American working class, in particular, has suffered concentrated losses from the so-called China shock and other adverse effects of past trade policy and the conditions that give rise to this massive trade deficit. You've heard some of these numbers before. The United States has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs and 90,000 factories since 1994. President Biden left with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit in goods, the largest of any country in the history of the world. The United States' share of world manufacturing output declined from 2001 to last year. In the fourth quarter of 2024, U.S. manufacturing as a share of gross domestic product was the lowest it had been in 20 years. During COVID, we were unable to procure semiconductors to build our cars, or materials for pharmaceuticals and personal protective equipment. During World War II, we built nearly 9,000 ships. Last year, the United States built only 3 ocean-going vessels. Our agricultural trade balance, which historically resulted in trade surpluses for our farmers, was in deficit the last 2 years of the Biden administration and likely will take some time to recover. These are all serious indicators of an economic and national security emergency, and we can't ignore it. One important driver of these negative trends has been unfair, unbalanced, and non-reciprocal trade. This includes the effect of higher tariffs imposed by other countries on the United States, the effect of non-tariff measures that promote other countries' exports and obstruct U.S. exports, and other foreign economic policies favoring overproduction and degrading America's manufacturing capacity.
Well, that party is over, folks. Here's the press secretary highlighting Nancy Pelosi's own words on our unsustainable trade deficits.
This president, I do just want to point out one thing, that the president, everybody in Washington, whether they want to admit it or not, knows that this president is right when it comes to tariffs and when it comes to trade. In fact, Democrats have long said that the United States of America has been ripped off by the countries around the world. They just don't want to admit it now because it's President Trump who is saying that. In June of 1996, Nancy Pelosi spoke on the House floor She urged her colleagues at the time to fight against the status quo trade policies that had contributed to America's trade deficit with China. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said, how far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit? How many jobs have to be lost for the American workers? How much dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? Those are the words of Nancy Pelosi in 1996. Well, President Trump is finally answering her call 27 years later. Wow. Nancy Pelosi can thank President Trump today for the 104% retaliatory tariff that will be going into effect on China. In 2007, Chuck Schumer spoke of our nation's crippling trade deficit, saying these are the kinds of records the American people don't want us to be breaking. The administration needs to move beyond words, take action now to reverse a trend that threatens our prospects for future economic growth. And Chuck Schumer said that in 2007. Finally, in 2025, President Trump is taking action. Recently defeated Democrat Sherrod Brown said on deficits in 2012 that our deficit then at China had reached an all-time high, and it was on pace to recede last year's record. The trade deficit had cost American workers millions of jobs at the time. These are the words of Democrats years ago. It is about time America finally has a president who is taking action to restore those millions of jobs back to the United States of America, to boost our manufacturing industry. He's doing what's right for the American people. It will take a lot of labor. It will take a lot of effort. But that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do.
And I think we got to fact check the press secretary here. Oh, wait, here it is. 1996, Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, how much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker, and how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo.
Wow.
As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to.
We'll save it, Pelosi. We've already got the facts. Here is the press secretary responding to a question in the press room today.
About tariff. You mentioned the 70 countries or so. I'm curious, though, under what conditions at this point would President Trump talk to President Xi about tariffs?
Look, I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
Yeah, let's go. Midnight tonight is when it all goes down. Here's more from the press secretary on the reciprocal tariff rates.
Countries have been. You just said that one of the reasons the tariffs are going into effect is that some countries have been ripping off the United States, but some of the tariffs target countries like Madagascar, Bangladesh, with very high levels of poverty. So can you explain how the president wants to correct the deficit with those countries? Is there a plan, for example, to onshore the textile industry that these countries are known because, and, just like, can you be specific about those, like, low income?
Sure.
countries?
Well, first of all, the reciprocal tariff rates that were implemented by country were focused on the monetary tariff that those countries have imposed on the United States, but also the non-monetary tariff barriers and the regulations, if you will, that have been put into effect over the years, making it harder for America to export to these countries. These were very carefully crafted numbers. There was also a 10% baseline tariff across the board, as well, as you know. Moving forward, the president will talk to any country that picks up the phone to call, and I can tell you the phones have been ringing off the hook, wanting to talk to this administration, this president, and his trade team to try to strike a deal. And it's because the world knows that they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer. The president has a lot of leverage on his side because he has the best economy and the best country in the world that he leads, and he knows that. And it's about dang time we finally have a president who uses that economic leverage to benefit American workers. And that's
baby, let's go. Let's benefit America. When America's punch, President Trump punches back harder. I love it. Here we have, let's see, we have this from the press secretary. Trump is not considering an extension.
Said he's not the president was asked and answered this yesterday. He said he's not considering an extension or a delay. I spoke to him before this briefing. That was not his mindset. He expects that these tariffs are going to go into effect. And you said something very important, Elena, in your question. You said the president has captivated the attention of the world. Absolutely, he has. And it's about time we have a president in the Oval Office who is putting the world on notice and is putting the American people first. And again, is using the leverage of the United States to negotiate good trade deals.
The world is on notice. Here we have more. The press secretary. The president is willing to pick up the phone and talk.
Has faced as the president said yesterday, Jasmine, both things can be true at the same time. And it is a non-negotiable position that the United States has faced a national security and economic crisis because of the unfair trade practices by countries around the world. As for the president, I have maintained this position. The entire administration has always said that President Trump is willing to pick up the phone and talk. And the president met with his trade team this morning, and he directed them to have tailor-made trade deals with each and every country that calls up this administration to strike a deal. And listen, and each and every one of these trade deals should be tailored and unique based on that country's markets, based on that country's exports, the imports here in the United States of America. What makes the most sense for the American worker and for our industry? The president is focused on putting America first.
And that's all that should matter. That's all. Let's keep going. We have more. This is from Lindell TV. President Trump inherited a fake economy built on smoke and mirrors. In a powerful breakdown, financial analyst Ed Dowd says the stock market Trump walked into was a fraudulent bubble propped up by just 7 stocks, inflated housing prices, and phony GDP numbers. Check this out.
And the risk, the stock market that Trump inherited was at all-time valuations. It was a joke. It was a joke stock market driven by 7 stocks. We wrote in January and then subsequently in a free news piece on our website about stock market valuations versus bonds. And statistically, all you had to do was look at the valuations and the risk-adjusted returns of bonds versus stocks, and you were going to lose money over the next 10 years if you bought at the top. And a lot of people did. And so now this is what we have. We have a lot of confusion, a lot of people screaming, wringing their hands. I saw a lot of people in our camp losing their minds. I guess their 401k came down, especially these young people screaming about their 401k. You can't touch it for 20 years anyways. So this is just a much ado about nothing. And I said this on Steve Bannon's show on Friday afternoon, the exact thing I'm telling you. Scott Bessent, who I don't know, I don't talk to, said exactly the same thing, that the AI bubble burst and that the stock market was already coming down. There were margin calls coming. This just accelerated it. And now we're going to get a relief rally. Unfortunately, Trump inherited a fraudulent economy that was propping up the housing market. We're going to get a housing recession. And ultimately, we think the stock market goes down 50% sometime, by the end of this year, early next. And that's just the way it is. There's nothing that can be done about it. It's endogenous to the economy. It was floated. The housing prices were floated by illegal aliens renting up and putting pressure on rents.
Wow.
Yeah. And look, as far as the messaging issue, I think they could have done a little bit better. But here's the thing. I don't think they had much media that would even really let them message, because everybody has been indoctrinated with bad so long, especially in conservative circles, right? So they had a hard time, I think, getting people to go out there and message that. They are obviously committed to the tariffs. We don't see them backing off. Bessent said he didn't care about the stock market at all. I think that scared a lot of your, people you used to hang out with, that they just don't care if the stock market drops. How long were the tariffs absolutely necessary to fix our economy? I mean, it's been propped up on smoke and mirrors for so long. Were they absolutely necessary? And then how long will it take for Trump to really kind of get our economy into a real economy, right? To course correct the decades long of bad policies and printing money,
Look, This is something needed to be done. We couldn't continue the way we were continuing because we would have a revolution. The real economy has been a disaster for middle-class America. The stock market was being fueled and pumped by 7 stocks that were benefiting from government spending and illegal aliens painting fake GDP numbers and payroll numbers.
Wow.
That all had to, Trump was elected to reverse all those policies. The stock market.
So the bubble has officially burst. Joe Biden's fake stock market is now resetting. Here's Marlin Steel CEO Drew Greenblatt. Our goal is that we're going to hire many more people. Check this out.
So we have to hire many more. We absolutely have had a couple people anxious about their stock market, about the stock market. But again, you know, our goal is that we're going to sell millions more dollars, so we have to hire many more people. If we do that, we're going to hire them at very good jobs, very good pay, wonderful benefits with the 401k match. True, there's some companies that have been buying T-shirts from Vietnam and China, and they're going to have to pay a couple more bucks for a T-shirt. And then the American consumer is going to have to pay more for a T-shirt. That's obviously not pleasant for those American consumers. But I think there's going to be an overwhelming surge of hiring in America as things level out, as American factories ramp up and people have to hire talent, buy machines. We've invested money in buying new machines because we're so enthusiastic, so optimistic about the future. That's going to start happening throughout the nation, and people are going to be leaning into the future. This is a very exciting time for the American manufacturing worker. We're going to be able to pull people from poverty into the middle class that used to not have an avenue. They had no shot at getting into the middle class. We're going to be able to offer them a shot.
I mean, what he's saying is 100% true. But I think what's funny is watching Turd Tapper there on screen, you can see him screaming inside because he's rooting for the destruction of this country. That's a fact. That's what they do at CNN. And he's in the messaging that's being presented on the channel at that moment in this clip, completely the opposite. American industry is raging back. Let's keep going. China says it will not bow. Ed Krasenstein. China says it will not bow to Trump's latest tariff threats of 50% in additional tariffs that will go into effect on April 9th. This means Trump plans to increase China's tariffs to 104. Remember, 70% of the products you buy on Amazon are sourced from China. Okay, Ed, thanks for that. Let's keep going. Here's Bungar Sargon. What POTUS is doing is he went out there on behalf of those destroyed working class communities.
Democracy. You know, back in the 1970s, the largest share of the wealth in this country was held by the middle class. That is how you have a stable democracy. That is how you have prosperity for all. That is the idea that this country was founded on, that if you work hard, you should have access to the American dream. And that was inextricably linked to the fact that 25% of the economy was in manufacturing. It was the largest share of the economy. Manufacturing pays good jobs, good wages, good conditions, where people who work really hard can expect to own a home and retire in dignity. And what happened between then and now was that our economy became an upward funnel of wealth into the pockets of the elites. Today, the largest share of the economy is in finance and real estate. And that middle class has been totally squeezed to where working class Americans, the hardest working Americans, can no longer expect to be able to afford the American dream despite working so hard. And what Donald Trump is doing is he went out there, and on behalf of those destroyed working class communities, he has taken on the entire international global order. He is waging war on behalf of the forgotten men and women of the heartland of this country and saying no longer will they be downwardly mobile and committing suicide and dying of fentanyl overdoses because they've been left out of the immense prosperity that this country has generated. That's the whole story right there.
Wow. Well said. Well said. That's what's happening right now. Here is the U.S. stock market, all in the green today. Yep. Where's the media on that one? Here we have more from CNN's Scott Jennings. after Trump's comments in the Oval Office on tariffs.
Now, it does seem to me this president has been trying to lay at Joe Biden's feet various economic problems that he inherited. Fine, fair. Now, it does seem to me that one way or the other, this is Donald Trump's economy now. He can, if the manufacturing comes back, he can get credit for that later. But if we don't bounce back from this, if we end up in a depression, that's on Donald Trump too.
Well, yeah, this is his plan. He's been talking about tariffs for a very long time. He believes in it. And right now, according to the Treasury Secretary, we have over 50 countries who've already come to the table and want to engage with the United States and talk about how we can have a more fair free trade relationship with them. That's a good thing, number one. Number two, this is only part of the deal. The other part of the deal is making the tax cuts permanent, and maybe even, if I were them, cut the capital gains tax and offer to slash the corporate tax rate and see if you can get any Democrats to join, because I'm amused by the Democrats who are all of a sudden free traders and for lower taxes. Well, if you've got Democrats who'd like to reduce the taxation on corporate activity, well, let's see how serious they are. Cut capital gains, slash the corporate income tax rate. I find it amusing that everybody talks about the 08 crash and the COVID. No one ever mentions that in 2022, the S&P was down 20, the NASDAQ was down 33, and I don't remember any of these Democrats being in hysterics when the market fully crashed in 2022. So I think Republicans are content
well, what
to
would
let
you
the president.
ascribe the reason for that happening to?
I assume it was some combination of terrible fiscal policy and lack of confidence in the president. And so,
I mean, they're sometimes related, but in this case, this was a very specific action with a very specific reaction.
And the market was flat today.
I do. In the end, it was. You're right about that. But man, was it a roller coaster of a ride.
It's down 400 points. That's not flat.
Did you see the percentages? I assume you can calculate percentages. I mean, 0.91, 0.10, 0.23. We're not talking about.
And there
massive
was a split decision. We should note the NASDAQ is slightly in the green.
One thing we should note, the NASDAQ is slightly in the green. Yep, and there it is. There's the picture. There's the green. So the global economic chessboard's being completely reset tonight, Patriots, as U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer pointed out. When Trump imposed tariffs during his first term, inflation actually went down. So much for the economists who claim this would hurt American consumers, right? Now look what's happening. Businesses are expanding, factories are reopening, and for the first time in decades, America is dictating trade terms instead of begging for them. The CEO of Marlin Steel just announced that they're hiring more workers with very good pay, wonderful benefits, 401k matching. This is what America First looks like in action. So here is the question that we need to be asking, and you can comment below. How many American jobs were sacrificed on the altar of cheap Chinese goods over the last 30 years? Who benefited from that sacrifice? Comment below with your thoughts. And get your next news gear at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com and show your support for The Real News. It's linked below.